Irashaimase! Hello and welcome to Fitaurus Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fitaurus. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and on the menu this Saturday, we have R-Type Final, celebrating 30 years of R-Type with the last IREM R-Type Shoot 'em Up made. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. But first, since we are celebrating the 30th anniversary of R-Type, let's take a quick look back at the series. The original R-Type launched in arcades on July 1st, 1987, 30 years ago today. With a unique blend of great level design, high difficulty, and new features to the shoot 'em up genre like the Force, IREM would forever cement this as a shoot 'em up genre classic. It received ports to several systems, including the PC Engine, the Master System, the Commodore 64 and Amiga, and the Game Boy. IREM quickly followed the success of R-Type with R-Type 2, released in December of '89. Though it did feature, of course, new levels and new weapons, the title was more difficult than the original and never was as popular. It did receive some home ports, but mostly in Europe. It was ported to the Amiga as well as the Atari ST, and also would receive a Game Boy port. In July of 1991, IREM released Super R-Type, their first console-exclusive R-Type. Though not an original title, Super R-Type is more like a remix of R-Type 2, including 4 stages from the arcade release and 3 that are unique to the Super NES Super Famicom version. They also increased the difficulty, making it notorious for being a blisteringly hard shoot-'em-up. In September of 1991, IREM released their first spin-off title in the R-Type series, Armed Police Unit Gallop, or Cosmic Cop-Out as it was known outside of Japan. This one is interesting for how different it is from the rest of the R-Type series. Although it is a spin-off, they dropped the Force and have a really unique system as far as the scrolling of the stage. The further you were to the right, the faster the screen would scroll, so you were not only competing to get the best score in this arcade game, but you were also competing to complete the stages as fast as possible. A really interesting chapter in the R-Type franchise. In December of 1992, we would receive the next arcade-exclusive R-Type, R-Type Leo. R-Type Leo is another one that takes a departure from the R-Type series. Although we have the R-Type name back in the title, the game is different in that instead of using a force throughout the course of the game, you have bits that act as your additional firepower. Unfortunately, both Armed Police Unit Gallop and R-Type Leo would remain arcade-exclusive titles, not easily available outside of the arcades. Though fortunately in this day and age there are ways to play them if you're interested in doing so. IREM returned to console releases for R-Type with R-Type 3, although by this point numbers are somewhat questionable, in December of 1993 on the Super Famicom/Super Nintendo. In this one we're flying the awesome R90 and they added the ability to choose your forces as you start the game. There's 3 different forces to choose between, making for some varied playstyles throughout the course of your run. This one is my personal favorite in the R-Type series, and if you ever have the chance to check it out, I would highly recommend doing so. The series would remain dormant for a number of years, until the release of R-Type Delta on the PlayStation in November of 1998. This is the first 3D R-Type, and it brings with it the option of choosing multiple ships for the first time. It's also considered to be one of the best in the franchise, so if you're looking to try out the best R-Type has to offer, this is one that you should probably check out. I myself haven't spent much time with it, so I really need to sit down and give this game the attention it deserves. Here we're going to jump a little bit ahead in the timeline. Just note that the next one should have been R-Type Final, but since that's the feature of today's video, we'll focus on that. That was released in July 2003 and was the last shoot-'em-up R-Type that IREM would make. But IREM would visit the series 2 more times in 2007 and then once again in 2009 for the releases of the R-Type Tactics series, or as they were known in the West, R-Type Command, although we only received the first one in the West. These ones are a huge departure from the R-Type formula of the past. Instead of being a shoot 'em up, we've got a turn-based strategy title, where you move your units around on this hexagonal grid and have these turn-based combat battles against the Bido forces that happen to be on those maps. I've only played through one of the campaigns myself, but it was well worth my time, and if you're interested in turn-based strategy and want to see the R-Type series in a different light and haven't played them, I would definitely recommend giving them a try. Which brings us to R-Type Final. Released on the PlayStation 2 in 2003, in a lot of ways it's the definitive R-Type game, but at the same time it's not. So one thing that R-Type Final does bring to the whole R-Type series is a lot of history. Both in all the fighters that we have available, there's over 100 possible ships to choose from that you unlock throughout the course of the game. As well as that, we also have a lot of history that's presented throughout the course of the game, which is something that's really awesome. But the game isn't without its flaws. So before we get started, we're going to actually look at the R Museum, and then we'll start the game from here. So the R Museum presents us all the various ships that we've unlocked. We have them in this wonderful tree pattern, which kind of helps you figure out how you're going to unlock additional ships. We can zoom in and get a closer look at the ships, and if we even want to, we can click on them and get more detailed information about them. The particular production number of it, its code name, and then we can also get information about it itself in the bottom, as well as what kind of wave cannon it has, what kind of force it has, and then the bits and missiles that it can equip. Some really, really neat stuff there. There are a ton of ships here, like I said, 101. We've also got the choices of 53 different forces, 12 bits, 10 missiles. It's insane how much stuff that they actually crammed into the game itself. So for our purposes today, we're going to be showing off 3 ships that I've handpicked as some of the more interesting ones that at this point I've unlocked. After several hours of play on this relatively new save of mine, I've only unlocked 25 of the 101 ships. So there's a lot of work to do if you want to unlock everything here. So, you can either access the hangar menu from the start screen, or you can access it from the museum. When you're here, you have 8 possible ships that you can select, and you can edit that ship selection from the museum, or you can also do it when you come across continues. So there's no real reason to worry about what ships you have available. There's definitely the chance to change these at some point, even throughout the course of a run. So all those ships, you have them available to you at all times, which is great. So we're going to be playing starting with the R9AX, the Delicatessen, because I am the chef, and what better ship to take than the Delicatessen. The Delicatessen is equipped with a standard force. We do have the ability to customize before we start the game. We can change the ship's color, but the orange is definitely nice. We also have the ability to change our missile and our bit, but I think the defaults will totally work for us today. Game start. There are 5 difficulties, baby through R-Typer. We'll just keep it on baby just for the simplicity of taking out bosses quickly. That's the main reason I'm playing on this difficulty setting. Let's blast off and strike the evil Bido Empire. Basking in the summer sun, I greeted the seabirds. But then, I entered the Demon's Den from Ship Archives. So there's a lot that's really cool about this stage. The intro, we're basically flying into this space colony that's crash-landed presumably on planet Earth. And we have a lot of awesome presentation happening throughout the course of the stage. So like previous R-Type games, we have a force, and with that force, once we start to pick up the weapon pickups, we gain different abilities. So there are 3 weapon pickups that we can get throughout the course of the game color-wise. There's the red, which is our straight shot. The blue, right here, is our angle shot. And then there's also the yellow for our ground shot. A staple of the R-Type series, we have this mech that's shooting his cannon at us. We'll charge up our beam cannon and fire at him. So depending on which ship you take, there are actually multiple charges you can get on your beam. Most of them will have just one, well, actually maybe two, but there are several that actually go beyond that, all the way up to 7 levels of charge. It's kind of crazy. So we're back to our red beam, and with the delicatessen, I really like this weird hexagonal shape that we fire. It's the reason I took this ship. I thought its shots were just awesome. And with 101 different ships, you actually get a lot of variance to that. The ground shot we have here is actually a really neat one as well, but it's not what I want to keep for the stage itself, so we'll go back to our awesome angled shot. So if you get an M pickup, you can also equip missiles, but unlike previous R-types, you don't have any speed pickups. We actually have the ability to change our speed from setting 1 to setting 4 right from the get-go. And that's something that's definitely nice. We have kind of a sub-boss here, just crawling along the floor, shooting at us. It's a good point to show off one of the things we can do. So if I put the bit, or rather the force, sorry, like calling it the wrong name, right under where the enemy's firing from, I can collect dose, which is the meter you see in the bottom left there. Basically what that is if the force goes in, deals damage or absorbs damage, basically absorbing the shots of the enemies, we collect dose. And that dose we can use to charge up the force's bomb. Once it's at full charge, we have a screen-clearing bomb that we can fire. It's something that was introduced to the game in R-Type Delta. So it's best to charge that with enemy shots. We can use these missiles here to do so. Doesn't look like we'll be at a full charge before we encounter the boss on this stage, though. So you might have noticed that there's not really a whole lot of music throughout the course of the stage, and that's one problem that's present throughout the entire game, in my personal opinion. There's just lacking just that little impact, that something that a good soundtrack can provide to a shoot 'em up. But we do have a lot of awesome atmosphere. We see our boss of the stage firing a giant beam at us all the way across this fallen colony. For this boss fight, yeah, let's go ahead and stick with our straight shot. Can we absorb these? Oh, I died. That's not what we want to see happen. Fortunately, we're close to a checkpoint, so it's not too problematic of a situation. Another reason I went and took the baby difficulty is, as we die, we don't really lose much of our firepower. We basically come back with roughly the same strength. Alright, here we are at the boss of Stage 1. This is definitely an interesting one, as it's kind of like almost a liquid metal. Then we have this enemy that protrudes out at us, charging up his giant beam that he was firing at us. We want to avoid that, of course, as it would do us no good. So one thing to keep in mind is that, like so many in the R-Type series, R-Type Final uses a checkpoint system rather than just allowing you to continue on the spot. That's definitely one of the things I don't like about the game, but there are some arguments for why it's a positive. You do start with the limited number of continues, but the more you play the game, you unlock infinite continues, basically free play, so that's not anything to worry about if you want to keep throwing yourself at it. And there we have Metropolis Quietus. We're going to take a second to change fighters, which you can do between stages. It's a really nice feature. And now we're going to play as the RX-10, the Albatross, with the awesome and bizarre Tentacle Force. So the Tentacle Force provides us some interesting new attack options. Stage 2 is a really interesting stage. So one thing I can say about it is, depending on how you fight the boss, it might not always be the same. There's actually 5 different variants for this stage, 2.0 through 2.4. And the way you fight the boss is what affects that. There's some protrusions on the boss that if we actually hit them, it will change the stage, advancing it through certain other variants of the stage, to it being like a completely dry desert environment, to what we see here, to being completely submerged. So these little enemies with their pull-ups are great for charging up our dose. I have that so we can actually show you the bomb. So one thing about the Albatross and its tentacle force that I'm not a fan of is its ground attack. So I'm going to avoid picking up the... I guess the game wants me to. I said I was going to avoid picking up the yellow power-ups, but apparently I don't have much choice. So yeah, absorbing these bullets is a great way to charge up our force so we have a full dose. Since I've already used one, we'll charge it back up again and hopefully make use of it later. So I haven't talked much about the way that the force actually works. So we have our regular shot, and I mentioned we also have a charge-up shot that can change vary depending on the ship that we've got. But you also, with the force, you have the ability to send it loose from the ship or attach it to your back. The different forces we have, in this case the tentacle force, has the awesome ability that it kind of homes in on the enemies and takes them out in its own way, making for a really powerful defensive force to use. Oh, I killed those enemies a little too fast and didn't get any more dose out of them. That's okay, I should be alright. We're actually almost to the boss of stage 2. Choices. Let us go with the red laser shot here. Here we are at the boss for stage 2. So this boss is relatively easy on lower difficulty settings. Basically, one charge shot on that glowing core should be enough to take him out. Oh, not quite. Ooh, tricky. Now we have to get around to the back of the boss and take out that core. But having a force that goes after the enemies itself takes care of that problem. And there we have stage 2, Twisted Ecology. Oh, dang it, I was going to change the fighter. A massive shadow threatens the city. This used to be our only refuge. So if you're familiar with a lot of the R-Type games, you'll know that one of the common features that R-Type games have is a stage where you're fighting a giant battleship. And R-Type Final follows that quite well. We're actually going to kill ourselves to get to a continue here so we can actually change ships. So once again, we have a stage 3 where we're battling a giant battleship. So at this particular screen, we could change which ship we wanted to load up as well. I'm going to load up the R-90 Ragnarok, the fighter from R-Type 3, because that's definitely my favorite R-Type. So taking the epic R-90 would be the way that I'd love to finish up this video. So one thing that makes the R-90 special is its beam capability. So you have the Hyper in R-Type 3, where if you charge up your beam, you can charge it up to Hyper, release it, and then you have rapid fire wave cannon. And that is present in R-Type Final. It doesn't have the power of some of the wave cannons, but it still can do a pretty hefty amount of damage. We're also equipped with the Shadow Force, which has a couple little shadow orbs that follow around it that shoot in kind of a follow trailing pattern from you, but it's not a direct trailing. You can move them around with your movement. It's a really neat feature. And then if the force is loose, then they just orbit around the force itself, shooting more or less in the direction you orient them. based off of your own movements. And, well, that's basically R-Type Final. You've got a ton of fighters to pick from, and these really neat, like, 2.5D style stages. Now, the plus flavors that the game has is, first off, it's got multiple paths and multiple endings. Like I said, Stage 2 has 5 different variants. There's an extra stage that you can access off of Stage 3, the stage that we're currently playing, based off of which fighters you take. There's multiple endings depending on certain actions that you can do later in the game. But, like, and then we have, like I said, all those starfighters. But, minus flavors, the game definitely has some that I think are a big issue. And one of the big ones is slow pacing. Like, even the first stage, with its super deliberate... I guess that's the thing, is it's like being deliberate. It's trying to show us like what's happening in the world around us, but in so many cases it just feels like it's slow. This stage in particular is beautiful and thematic. We have the battleship flying through the city. We see things falling off of it, dropping onto the city. We even see emergency vehicles on the roads below, that sort of thing. It's brilliant in its design, but at the same time, frustrating in its execution. The music also, I don't feel helps at all. It's one of those things where a lot of times it just feels like the music is being more of a drag on the pace than anything. And that's like really the problem, is it just has like bad pacing with the music not helping at all. And then, yes, there are 101 possible fighters to unlock, but the amount of time, the number of that you have to put into the game, the number of times you have to beat the game to unlock all of them is crazy. So it's a huge, huge grind. It is made a little bit easier by the inclusion of cheat codes, so there is an invincibility code that you can activate to make the grind a little bit easier on yourself. Something that you can do if you're looking to unlock all the fighters, but even still, it's going to take you a long time to do that. And then just the whole checkpoint system. There's just times where it's frustrating, where any time for the next minute or so, if we die, we're basically back to this particular point of the stage. Not something that's awesome in my mind. But that said, I feel R-Type Final does have a rather important place in the R-Type franchise as being the final shoot-'em-up in the R-Type series. And the fact that IREM did take the time to include as much as they did, like, the game's got a lot of content, but it's got its problems as well. It's just like, it's so close to being this great farewell to a wonderful series that is tried and true throughout the course of shoot-'em-ups as being like one of those great challenges. But just some poor choices, some poor execution will hold it back. Still, it's definitely a title that if you're a fan of the R-Type series, I would at least recommend checking it out. Alright, that should wrap it up for this week's episode of Shoot 'em Up Saturday. Thank you so much for joining me for the 30th anniversary of R-Type. As always, I look forward to seeing you again next week.